Hello, friends. Mark Johnson here. Welcome back to another episode of the TRIRIGA War Room, where experts advise. In today's lesson, we are going to continue with our TRIRIGA development series. We're going to create the base form for our base business object. So this is going to be the first form in our module that's going to be used to then act as a template for all the other forms that we create. We're going to get logged in. This is our TRIRIGA 4.1.11.1 instance that has our previous work in it. So I'm going to go ahead and click continue here to get logged in. So one of the things that I noticed as I was doing my prep was that there were some fields that were not added to the business object that should have been there. And they're standard fields that get used over and over, which is, kind of part of my requirement for the fields that I put on there. So let me just go back to the data modeler real quick just so I can show you guys these and just talk about it a little bit. So this is our CST Sports business object. So the user message and the user message flag, these fields I forgot to add it, right? Well, these are definitely, the user message field is definitely required in order, to do the attention section. And the tri-language list field is very common, right? It's used to keep track of the language. So and those are the fields that I've gone ahead and added so that they can be available for our form. So you guys did not see me add them. They are not in the video. They got added. So just so you know, come into your CST sports business object if you're doing the same lesson on your own in environment and add these three fields. And then once you've added and published, then those fields will be available for us to pick up by our form because the form builder, remember, it only shows us the published version of the object. So if you haven't published, then you won't see those fields if it hasn't published once. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that there just in case we discover anything else that I may have missed. And open up the tools and then come into the form builder. So one of the things that I want to do is I'm going to come here just to location, and then I'm going to open up the base form for location, which is try location. And I'm going to use this to help me build my base form. So let's go ahead and we'll reset, get all of our things in here, just so that I can kind of see, okay, layout. So for instance, we're going to mimic this kind of layout for the general section. And then also we want to copy the attention section. So we want to make sure that we get all the details for it. And then the same sort of thing for our system tab. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize this and come to our CST Sports module. So you can see, right, there's no forms, there's nothing existing. So there's no way that I can use an existing form to start off with for this particular object. So we're going to have to create something, and then we can't use the copy tab because there's no other forms in this module. So copy tab just allows us to copy from a tab from an existing form to another form, but only to form this in that same module. So the base form, like the base BO, is going to serve as a template for all the other forms that we create, right? It's going to be the form that we select and we copy over and over to use as a starting point before we go in and further customize and enhance and add in the object-specific information. So you can see I don't have copy, open, just new. I need to select my business object. There's only one, so the name, CST Sports, and then the label. Right, we want the label to be user-friendly, so we're going to ditch the prefix. I'm not going to put anything as far as the description. I noticed I went back and checked out the form video. I didn't cover the form properties, even though I covered some tabs and section properties. So let me just talk about these real quick. So default form, we're going to go ahead and select this. So default form says that, if you have an object that has multiple forms, for example, the try building business object has a try structure form as well as a try building form. When you go and you create a record of that object, what's the form that it's going to use by default? Right? It needs to know, so it's not just randomly picking, right? Because otherwise you don't know if it's going to randomly pick the form that you want or not want, because you don't specify the form to use on a create records task in a workflow. So that's what the default form does. So I go ahead and set that, even though there's going to be no other forms. It's obviously this is the default form for it. So, but I'm going to go ahead and set it. Single tab just means that instead of having multiple tabs across the top, everything's just going to be a single tab. I do not want that. Preload workflow. Now, preload workflow is going to execute a workflow here that's going to fire every single time this record opens. So you do not want to put logic in this particular in workflow unless it's definitely needed every time the record opens. Otherwise, you're wasting a lot of processing power and time. And remember that this workflow, while it's running, the user's going to sit in there waiting for all that logic to happen before the record fully loads up on the screen for them, right? So if you go into some complex logic that takes a while, you're going to be delivering a very poor user experience. So I personally try not to use the preload workflows unless I absolutely have to. I try to do things another way. Sometimes you don't have a choice, right? And so then you do. But just kind of think of efficiency, right? If I'm going to use preload workflow, I want it to be the bare bones as necessary, speed for the user, and because it's going to execute every time somebody opens that record. So if they open the record, it runs. They close it. The record. They open the record, it runs again. They close the record. They open the record again, and it runs it, and they close the record. Right. So every single time. So preload workflow will run every time except for on record creation. So the very first time when the record's being created, the preload does not run. But the pre-create workflow, which is specified in the data modeler, right, that's the workflow that will run and the logic will happen. So the pre-create, very first time you're creating the record, that logic applies. The preload does not apply. After the creation, every single time the record opens, the preload workflow will execute. The pre-create will not, because the pre-create is only on creation. So in this case, this is a base PO. I have no logic to attach to it. There's going to be nothing for the preload workflow. Allow bookmark to create record and to create specific record. I want a user to be able to create a bookmark to the spot for creating records of this type, as well as being able to bookmark a specific record. So we haven't really talked about bookmarks, but you see here, right, in the My Bookmarks, you do have the ability to, add bookmarks and bookmark different things in TRIRIGA, and they'll show up here. And that setting there controls whether they'll be able to do that or not. Calculate Excel. Not going to really discuss this property too much, but we're not going to have any Excel sections that are going to need to be forced to be recalculated. So we don't need to have this calculate Excel. The show association, we want the association tab at the top of our record to be there so us developers can click and see what are the associated records to our record, right? Same thing, from a development perspective, right? We want to see the workflow instance tab. We want it to be available so we can go in and look at instances and help us troubleshoot workflows. Reports. If you have reports, form reports that are attached to a form, well, then you'd probably want to have the show reports there so that you can go to the reports tab and see the reports that are available. In this particular case, there's going to be no reports, so I'm not going to select it. The pop-up height, right? So if you have a scenario where this form pops up, what's the default behavior do you want as far as the height and the width, right? Do you want it just to be a little bit of a form, which could be problematic, right? You have little scroll things, going back and forth, up and down, right? Like this, right? Scroll bars, right? Or not. So I'm just going to select full screen, alternate print form. So when you can create a form for an object that you use just for printing. So for instance, like a lease or a building, right? You may not want the entire set of information of every field that's on those objects because those are very busy objects, right? Lots and lots of fields, lots and lots of data, right? You're going to use lots and lots of paper. But maybe you're just looking, you know what? I just need some of the key information from these objects, right? So you can build a form that has just the fields for that key information in that layout, and then you can say, hey, for this particular form, I'm going to specify an alternate print form so that if I have a record open that's utilizing this form and the user says to print it, it's not going to print this form. It's going to use the alternate print form to go and print it, right? So there are no forms in this module. This is our very first form, right? So there's nothing in the dropdown to be able to select. And of course, revision, object label, and the modified by and date, these are all populated by the system as we create. So I'm going to go ahead and click apply. And we get a little warning that, hey, if you change the default form for the business object, it may affect workflows that create or modify metadata of this type of record. Well, that's fine. There are no workflows or anything so it's not a concern for me. Yeah. So at this point, we have now created our form. You can see, right, the default form checkbox grayed out, but there's nothing on this form. So the first thing we need to do is we want to add a tab. So from the form level, we're going to click on Add Tab. So you can't add tab if you're on a section, right? So if we already had sections and we had a section highlighted here in the navigation, right, we wouldn't have the Add tab. And likewise, if we're on a tab, we wouldn't have the Add tab. We would have an Add section. So let's go ahead and we'll add the tab. And I'm going to name the tab CST General, and it's a General tab. All right, so tab information and instruction. This is information that it will display at the very top of the form when you change tabs, where you can provide the user with information. Now, the location one here does happen to have settings, so we can see in the general, or actually on the general tab, right? It's saying that, hey, required. So, hey, the information that's on this tab is required to be filled in. And then so it puts the tab information inside the parentheses, gives you a colon, and then you get the instruction, right? So here's the instruction. So we can kind of see a difference. So the system tab, right, would be a tab that the user doesn't generally see, but the developer or administrator would see, right? And you see this says that the information here is optional, and that you can just review the system information. Now, I'm not going to copy and put these into mine, although I probably should, just from the standpoint that whenever you're doing development in an environment, you want to kind of match the look and feel, right? So that the user that's using the environment has a consistent user experience, right? If every developer came in and let's say they use different fonts and colors and stuff, right, it would be chaotic for the user, right? And it would drive a lot of unsatisfaction. So you don't want that. You want to do things, kind of in a consistent way. But that being said, I'm not going to do it for this example. Visible, our tab is going to be visible. Access key, so this is like a hotkey, right? That you can Control A, Alt A, whatever it is, to go and navigate to the tab. So those you want to set, especially if you're in an environment where that's heavy keyboard, like a call center, right? You don't want the people who are running or operating your call center have to keep taking their hands off the keyboard to go to the mouse, right? That slows them down, right? So you want to be able to have the shortcuts that they can use the keyboard shortcuts to you know tab around through things or jump to certain tabs, with the hotkeys, and that's what the access key does here. The style class we're going to leave blank because it's, again, that user consistency. If we come and look, it's blank here. And then custom, this isn't going to be a custom tab. A custom tab allows us basically to open up a web page inside of our tab, right? So I don't need to do that. So we have nothing else to set here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit apply. All right, so now we can see over in our navigation, we've got a tab. So the first thing I'm going to create is our attention section. So you can see, because I'm at the tab level, my commands change. So I have the ability to add a section. So I'm going to add a section. It's going to be a form section. So a form section is what allows us to display fields. So I'm going to call this I think it's the user message. So let's just click. Yep, try user message. We'll just call it CST user message. And then the label is going to be attention, exclamation point. And then we're going to set the tab color. So it's kind of a yellowish color is what we want. So again, we want to, kind of have a consistent look and feel. So we're going to come over here and we'll pick one of these yellows. Style class, there's nothing. All right. So we come back here. All right. So we want our section to be visible. We want it to be expanded by default. So what that means is if I click over here and come over here in the general. So see the little minus here? So in the actual record, you can click on that minus and it would collapse this whole section to where you don't see anything except for the section title, right? And then it would have a little plus next to it. So each user has basically the ability to collapse or unclap sections so that, they can collapse sections of information that they don't care about just so they can have just the pertinent information that they want, right? And then the system kind of saves that information in the cookies so that it provides a better user experience, for that user so they're not having to go in and collapse the same sections and stuff all the time. So that behavior and whether or not the section starts off expanded or collapsed is there in that property, right? The expand section. So in this case, I want it expanded. It's not going to, and I'm going to actually, I'm going to make this section read only, right? And then by default, then all the fields will be read only in the section, right? And it's just going to be a single field because it's our attention section. And I'm not going to do anything for style class, the start row. So as you're adding sections onto a tab, right, it's kind of broken out into a grid of rows and columns. So by default, it's one row with 12 columns. So this is saying, hey, we're going to go across one row in all 12 columns. That's fine. I want it to cover up the whole width of the form, so I'm going to go ahead and click apply. And so now I've got my attention section. So you can see in my components, it's changed now. Instead of having sections available, which we had on the tab, these are fields. So I want to display the user message field. So I'm going to go ahead and click, and hit add. And then now we're going to come in and expand this and then click on our field so we can set our field properties. So we don't want the attention, we don't want the attention label to show for our field. So what we're going to do is we're going to come down here and we're going to click hide label. Right? Alternatively, I mean, we could come to the label and just delete the label, but then we wouldn't. You would just have a space, right? So then you would have a little bit of a gap. So it's better to hide the label. All right. Then the label style we want to change. So for the attention section, it uses the style class 2. So we're going to set label style to match the label style. And then data style class, we want to set also class 2 because that's what the attention section uses. So data style gets the data style one, label style gets label style one. Notice that my drop down, I can select any of these. Right? So I want to make sure that I didn't select label style for both, for instance, because again, it's what impacts the label versus the data that's inside the field. So for the fields, they get arranged in a grid on your section of 2 columns by default, right, per row. Now, you can change that, and you can go with 3 columns, or you can go all the way up to 12 columns. But by default, it's 2 columns. So I want this particular section, I'm going to set the row span to be 3, and the column span to be 2. Right, I want a nice fat attention section. So if I come over here and I look, right, they also use 3. Now, for some reason, they have the user message flag in here, which I don't know why. It's got to be some sort of mistake. It's not, you don't put the flag into that section, right? The flag is generally not displayed on the form at all. It's displayed in queries and stuff so that you can see that you have an issue. But all right, come back here. So we've got our field, and we can see it's not set to required, which you wouldn't want it to require a value in it in order to be able to transition, right? That would be bad. And it's not set to read only, but it's not a problem that it's not set to read only because we set the section to read only. And so because the section's read only, all the fields in it are automatically read only. Because the user's not going to type in this area, right? We're going to set values in here using workflow to notify the user that, hey, there's a problem. So I'm going to go ahead and click on apply. I've got nothing else to set. So we're good there. So now we can go to our general section. So I got to come back up to the tab level so I can set add a section. Well, add section. Again, it's going to be a form section because we're wanting to display fields, right? So we're going to again call it CST general. Our label is just going to be general. I'm not going to set a title bar color. I want it to be visible. I want it to be expanded. I do not want it to be read-only. I'm not setting a style class. And notice it went to row 2 because our attention section is on row 1, and it's going across all 12 columns. So our settings are good. We're going to hit apply. And so now I want to lay out the values. Right? So I'm going to select the TRIIDTX field and my TRIStatus field. And then I'm going to select the name field and then the description field. I don't really have any other fields that I want to add to our base BO, or our base form rather. So I'm going to click on add, but I do want to arrange this a little bit, right? So the description isn't going to be too helpful for us. Here we want it to be nice, fat, and wide. So let's go ahead and we're going to move it down a row. And we're going to put it in the first position, and we want it to span 3 rows, and we want it to go across both columns. Right. So let's come and let's check out our status. So the status should be read-only. It is not. So I'm going to select read-only. So remember, when you're at the form level, right, you can be more restrictive. You can't be less restrictive, right? So if the status field was already read-only at the business object level, then you wouldn't. This would be grayed out and would be selected. You wouldn't be able to make it not read-only. But because the status is not a read-only field at the business object level, I have the ability to make it read-only at the form level. So I'm going to set that to be read-only. And I'm going to click apply. So let's just kind of come over here and then look. So here they've got the name where it comes all the way across. So I want to kind of just match this. So I'm going to come to the name field now, and I'm going to make it span both columns. And I want to make it a required field. So again, right, if it can be more restrictive, just can't be less restrictive at the form level. So I'm going to make it required. Oh. So that's going to be it for our general section. So now we can go ahead and go and do our record information tab. So I have to come back up to the form level in order to add a tab. And we'll call it CST record information. And I'm not going to do tab information or instruction or the style. So if we come to, oh, see, I already screwed it up. So it's be the system tab, and then the record information is the section. So we'll go ahead and fix that. So you want to be very careful when you delete. So I'm going to select the tab that I want to delete, and I'm going to hit delete. So am I sure? Yes. Okay. Now let's try this again. We're back up on the form level. We're going to hit add tab, and this is the system tab. All right. So again, right, on each tab, we want to have an attention section so that we have if we have a user message set, it's at the top of every tab so that the user will see it no matter what tab they're on. So one nice thing that we can do nowadays that you couldn't do when I first started doing development is you have the ability to copy a section. So I'm going to come over and click on the intention section, have it highlighted, and then I come over and hit copy section. And now what the copy section does is it allows us to copy the section from one tab to another tab. So I just have to specify the target tab. This is going to be my system tab. And I'm going to keep the same name here. And boom. Right, that just saved me a few minutes of development. That's great. And now I can click on my system tab and I can add section, and for the section it's going to be a form section because it's going to be fields, and this is going to be the record information one. All right. I want it to be visible, expanded, show the title bar, and it's going to get starting row 2 because the attention section has row 1. That makes sense. Boom. All right. So I'm going to pop back over here to see. Right? So here it's got geography, organization, and location. So as I add fields, the order that I add them, it's going to populate them in. The first one's going to go into row 1, column 1. The second field will go into row 2, column 2. Third one will go in row 3, or I'm sorry, row 2, column 1. And then the fourth would be row 2, column 2. And the fifth would be row 3, column 1, right? So on and so forth. And in this case, I want system geography, system organization, and system location. So if I select this in the order of geography first, that'll put my geography here, and then location, it'll put that up here, and then organization next, right? Then I'll have two of the three things in the right order. If I click them in the order of geography, organization, location, right, I would get geography here, organization here, and then location here, right? Then I've got two things I have to kind of move around and down, um, and it's just a little bit, more confusing and a little more clicks, a little more work, right? So you want to think and develop efficiently. So I'm gonna so it's gonna be org, location, and then organization. So I'm gonna come down here and I'm gonna say org, location. Nope, got that wrong. It's geography, location, and then organization. Right. So let's just verify that. Geography, organization, location. Yep. So I hit add. Notice it put them in the order that I selected them. So now I can go ahead and move this guy down to the third row. I want to start in column 1, and by default, again, in the section, it is 2 columns by default, so I want to go across both of them. So I'm going to hit apply. And you know what? I'm going to change the label on this too to match. So it's system location and apply. All right, so this is called system geography, and we want it to span both columns. All right, is it system org? Or, no, system organization, so it's not abbreviated. System organization. And we want this to span both columns as well. All right, so those kind of match. Again, I'm trying to follow this as close as possible. Now, I am going to do something different because I like to include the business object name as well as its label. And the reason for that is not everything in TRIRIGA can you derive the name from the label. So, for instance, they had tried for line items were then called opportunities. And so the label says opportunity, but it's try deferred maintenance line item or something like that, right? So it doesn't match. And so unless you know specifically, you wouldn't know. So I always try to develop the be kind for those that might be newer and may not know. And so I'm going to add a little bit more stuff in here, but I'll go ahead and do the record. All right, so the record language will be next. Oops. All right, so what do I want to add after language? They're doing their form. I'm going to take the record name and move it up there instead. And then I'm going to do my business object name and then its label. And then I'm going to do my forms name and then its label. And then we'll do the project name and the record state. and then the created date, the modified by TX, the modified date. So let me go ahead and I'll expand this so you can see the fields, right? So we've got the created SY, the modified by TX, the modified SY, and we're not going to have the system hierarchy path because this is not a hierarchy module, and we have not added that object. So we're going to do created SY, and then the modified by TX, and then the modified by system field. So if I click add, boom. Right, they're all there. They're in the order that I want, maybe. Yes, no. No, made a mistake. Thought I selected form name and form label, but I missed the label. So everything is off now by 1. So I'm going to start at the bottom here and I'm going to update it. So this is going to be row 9, column 1. So this guy here is going to be row 8, column 2. Now notice that even though I set that to column 2, it moved to the left, right? Because it renders as HTML, which always wants to move to the left and up. Since there's nothing to the left of it, it's going to slide over. So once I move this guy down, then they'll have something to the left of it, and it will no longer slide. Same sort of thing. Again, nothing to the left, so I gotta move this guy down. All right, so I want to put the form label in right after the form name, right? So I can't just click form name here and then say, okay, do form label, and it'll put it in right after, right? No, it doesn't work that way, right? It always just goes to the bottom. So whatever the last row is, if there's room in the second column, then I'll put it there. Otherwise, then it goes to the start of the next one. So now I can move this guy up. So I need to look. My row number is 6. So I can come up here and say, okay, it's row 6, column 2. Boom. So form name, and I'm going to change this from saying record form to form label. So I got the BO name, the BO label, the form name, the form label, project name, the record state, created date, who modified it, and the modified date time. Right, that's going to look similar. Yes, it does. All right, great, we're done. So that's everything that I want to have, and it'll help. Then I can use this as my base form and copy it. So last thing I need to do now is just come up and just double check my state transition family. It's all here because I selected the BO, it pulled it in because I was creating new. When you're copying forms, however, you have to always come and pay attention to your state transitions, right? Because if your form that you're copying has state transitions that don't exist on your object, when you copy that form to your object, those transitions are going to strip off, right? So you always want to double check and make sure that your new transitions look right. In this case, they do. So I can come back here to layout, and I'm going to go ahead and hit publish. And there we go. We have now created a base form for our base business object. So we'll be able to use that form as a template and create for all of our other objects. So I'm going to come over here. Let's just refresh this. I can see that I've got my sports business object. It is published and it's got an in progress label. That's as I expected. So now that we've created a form for our base business object, the next thing that we can do is we can actually start unit testing because we can create a record, right? An instance of our form and object. So that's what we'll do next time is we'll go ahead and we're going to have to we might have to do a little work first to get to it because we're going to have to create a mechanism in order to create records. So that can either be, with navigation or just a simple you know, manager query type thing or whatnot. So I'll figure out which way I want to do it, and we'll go ahead and we'll get a record created. And then what we need to do is we need to cycle that record through all the different state transitions, and then for every state transition we need to validate does the status and previous statuses are those getting set correctly on my record. Are the transitions that are supposed to be visible and available in a given state visible and available, or am I seeing additional states, right? And am I seeing some hidden transition that I shouldn't see, right? Those are the things that you want to look for and clean up. And you want to do all this unit testing before you start creating other objects and using this form as a template, right? Because it's very common to find that you've made a mistake, right? For instance, those status classifications, right? It's case sensitive. It's looking for an exact match, right? So if you used a lowercase I in revision in progress instead of an uppercase I, well, guess what? It's not going to find a record with that exact match name, and so then it's not going to set a value. So those things happen, right? So you always want to unit test, and when you're going to unit test, you got to cycle it through, right? Everything. What are all the different possible routes that it can go? And so we'll go and we'll do that. We'll create a record. We'll take it through and we'll validate and we'll verify. And hey, if everything's good and great, then good. We'll be ready for the next lesson, and we can start creating other objects in our module. And if not, if we've made mistakes, then we'll go and we'll correct them, right? And that may require us that that's a problem in the state transition on the business object, so I've got to go and revise the business object, go and make the correction, then republish the business object, and then try again. So we will see, and we'll go from there. So thank you for your time. As always, please do like, subscribe to the channel, give me any type of feedback. You can leave comments. You can reach out directly to me on LinkedIn. Message me there as well. If you have any ideas for future videos that you would like to see, that'll be welcome too. Although this development series will take quite a while, it'll be a while till I get something else. But I do have at least one other guest instructor always looking for more. So if you are interested in doing a video as well, please reach out to me. And with that, thank you for your time. We'll see you next time.